The story opens on an ordinary summer afternoon, the kind that smells faintly of cut grass and fading sunlight. The narrator, a 22-year-old man, arrives at his friend's suburban home, a place he's visited countless times before. The front yard looks the same, but something in the air feels different, quieter, heavier, like the moment before rain. His friend isn't home yet, but his friend's mother, a 40-year-old American woman with long black hair and graceful poise, opens the door instead. She's dressed casually, a loose cream blouse tucked into jeans, barefoot on the wooden floor. Her presence fills the doorway, not with loudness, but with a kind of unshakable calm that makes him hesitate before speaking. Her dark eyes study him in that slow, assessing way that makes time stretch. She smiles, soft, polite, but her voice carries warmth when she says, "He's running late again. You can wait inside." Inside, the air smells of vanilla and something faintly citrus, her perfume perhaps. He sits on the couch, pretending to scroll his phone, but his mind drifts. The house feels alive with her presence. The gentle rhythm of her footsteps in the kitchen, the soft hum of music playing from a speaker, the clink of a glass on marble. She moves with quiet grace, every gesture deliberate yet unforced. He notices the little details, a few laugh lines near her eyes, the faint trace of tiredness beneath her elegance, and something else too, loneliness, perhaps, carefully hidden behind polite smiles. It draws him in, not with desire but with curiosity, a pull he can't quite name. She walks over with a glass of lemonade, the sunlight catching the faint gold in her hair. When their fingers brush as she hands it to him, it's nothing, a simple touch, yet it sends a pulse of awareness through him. She feels it too. He can tell by the slight pause before she pulls her hand back, by the flicker of something unreadable in her eyes. They talk about nothing, her garden, his college classes, the weather. But beneath every word is a quiet tension neither dares to name. When she laughs, it's soft and genuine, but there's a glint of mischief in it, like she's aware of how close he's watching her. And then, just before his friend's car pulls into the driveway, she leans in a little closer, her voice low and teasing as if she's sharing a secret meant only for him. "You're just a boy," she whispers, her breath warm near his ear, "but I like boys who misbehave." The words are light, almost playful, yet they leave him breathless. She straightens, smiles as if nothing happened, and turns toward the kitchen just as the sound of the front door opening breaks the silence. That was the moment everything shifted, the beginning of something neither of them planned, but both somehow already felt coming. The next time he saw her, the air already carried the quiet memory of that last conversation. It wasn't just words that lingered. It was the tone, the glimmer of something unspoken. Days had passed, yet he still replayed the sound of her laughter, the calm steadiness of her gaze. She lived next door to his friend, in a sun-washed house with ivy curling up the porch railings. He'd been dropping off a borrowed book when she appeared at the gate, holding a watering can, sleeves rolled to her elbows. The afternoon light caught on the droplets scattered across her arms, the kind of small detail the world might miss, but he somehow couldn't. "Did you finish it already?" she asked, nodding toward the book. He smiled, a little embarrassed. Couldn't put it down. Her lips curved in quiet approval. Then it did its job. She turned back to the flower beds, her movements unhurried, her voice carrying through the soft rush of the hose. "Stories that stay with us, they change how we see people, don't they?" He leaned on the fence, pretending to look at the plants, though his attention was entirely on her. "Some stories make us notice things we didn't before." She glanced up at him then, not long, not intense, just enough. That was the shift, the moment when ordinary talk slipped into something else. They spoke of simple things, travel, the city, the books she used to love when she was younger. Yet every subject turned personal in unexpected ways. He found himself asking questions he normally wouldn't, curious about the person beneath her calm exterior. She answered with thoughtful pauses, revealing little pieces of herself, like someone who's learned the art of restraint. When she laughed, it wasn't the polite laugh from before. It was fuller, warmer, touched with familiarity. He noticed the faint dimple on her left cheek, the soft lines that deepened when she smiled. She carried herself with that graceful ease of someone who knew who she was, and that confidence drew him in far more than he wanted to admit. As he handed her the book back, their fingers brushed again, a small, accidental contact, yet it carried the same quiet electricity as before. Her eyes flicked up, meeting his for a heartbeat longer than necessary. "Thank you," she said softly, though her voice held a note he couldn't quite name. He walked away, the summer light warm on his shoulders, his thoughts anything but clear. She wasn't just someone older. She was someone who saw him, listened without judgment, and spoke with the kind of honesty that made him want to listen forever. That evening, he realized it wasn't what she said that stayed with him. It was the way she looked at him, as if she, too, had begun to notice things she hadn't before. The next week unfolded like a quiet echo of everything that had already been said and everything that hadn't. The narrator found himself walking past her house more often than usual, pretending it was coincidence. Sometimes she was out watering her plants, sometimes reading on the porch, sunlight catching in her dark hair. Each time, she greeted him with that soft, knowing smile that seemed to carry a story of its own. One afternoon, she invited him to help carry a box of old books from her car. The simple favor stretched into an hour of conversation, the kind that drifted naturally between silence and laughter. Her home felt lived in. Framed photographs on the mantel, a faint scent of lavender and paper. It wasn't fancy, but it was full of warmth, the kind that made people linger without realizing how much time had passed. He set the books down on the coffee table, dust rising in thin spirals. "You really keep everything," he teased lightly. She smiled. "Some things are worth keeping, even if they've aged a little." Her tone was gentle, but her eyes flickered toward him for just a second, enough to make him wonder if she meant more than the books. They sat for a while, sorting through the collection, her fingers tracing the worn covers as she told him which stories had changed her, which ones she'd outgrown. He listened, drawn in not just by her words, but by the quiet sincerity behind them. When she handed him one of her favorites, their hands touched again. It wasn't a spark this time. It was steadier, softer, like recognition. "You like this one," she said. "It's about two people who meet at the wrong time, but still manage to teach each other something lasting." He nodded slowly, understanding the weight of what she'd said, even if she hadn't meant it that way. Or maybe she had. Either way, the silence that followed was comfortable. Familiar. As the afternoon light shifted, she brought them tea. The steam curled upward, filling the space between them with warmth. He noticed how she tucked a strand of hair behind her ear, how she paused before speaking, as if measuring her words carefully, unwilling to break whatever fragile peace had formed between them. "You remind me of someone I used to know," she said softly. "Someone who always asked questions no one else thought to ask." He smiled a little shyly. "Is that a good thing?" She looked at him, then really looked. "It's a rare thing." Something about that answer stayed with him long after he left. It wasn't about admiration or attraction. It was about being seen, about the quiet magic that happens when two people notice each other in a world that rarely slows down. That night, as he placed the borrowed book on his desk, he found himself tracing the imprint of her handwriting on the first page. The words were simple. "Don't rush the story." He smiled himself. Maybe she hadn't been talking about the book at all. A few days later, rain arrived unannounced, soft at first, then steady, filling the neighborhood with that faint scent of earth and quiet. The world seemed to slow down, and with it came the pull to see her again. He didn't plan to. It just happened, the way certain moments seem to find us instead of the other way around. She was standing by her porch, holding an umbrella, watching the rain fall over her small garden. Her dark hair shimmered with scattered droplets, strands clinging to her neck. When she noticed him approaching, her face brightened with that familiar warmth that somehow made everything else fade into the background. "You'll get soaked out here," she said, her voice calm but colored with amusement. "Maybe," he replied with a half-smile, "but I didn't want to wait for the weather to get better." She raised an eyebrow at that, half teasing, half curious. "Is that about the rain or something else?" He didn't answer right away. Instead, he stepped under her umbrella, close enough to hear the soft patter of raindrops on the fabric above them. The air smelled like jasmine and rain, and for a long moment neither spoke. She gestured toward the porch. "Come in. I made tea." Inside, everything felt softer. The muted sound of rain against the windows, the faint hum of an old record player, and the warmth that seemed to linger in every corner of her home. She poured the tea carefully, her movements slow and deliberate. He watched her, noticing how at ease she looked in her own space, the kind of ease that comes from knowing who you are and what you've survived. It wasn't beauty that held his attention anymore. It was something deeper, something steady and real. "You always seem calm," he said quietly, "even when everything else feels uncertain." She smiled faintly. "That's the trick of growing older. You stop expecting calm to come from the world around you." She glanced toward him, her eyes thoughtful. "You start building it inside instead." Her words lingered in the air, soft yet heavy with meaning. He nodded, though part of him wondered if he could ever learn that kind of stillness. The rain grew heavier, a steady rhythm against the roof. She sat beside him, not too close, but close enough that he could feel her presence, a quiet reassurance, like the steady beat of a metronome. For a while, they just listened to the rain, to the faint crackle of the record, to the kind of silence that feels like understanding. When he finally stood to leave, she walked him to the door. The storm had eased, leaving only the light mist of drizzle. She handed him her umbrella, her fingers brushing his again. "Keep it," she said softly. "You'll bring it back when the sun returns." He didn't realize until much later that she wasn't really talking about the umbrella. She was talking about time, about patience, about moments that wait quietly for what comes next. And just like that, the rain had written another chapter neither of them had planned to begin. The next few weeks passed in quiet rhythm. They didn't see each other every day, but when they did, it always felt natural, like the conversation had simply paused, waiting for them to return. There was no rush between them, no declarations or forced attempts to name what was happening. Yet each small encounter added a layer of meaning neither could easily explain. He began visiting in the late afternoons, sometimes under the pretense of returning a book or borrowing one. Other times, it was just to sit on her porch while she tended her garden. They talked about everything: life, dreams, disappointments, even the quiet fears that most people never say out loud. She never treated him like someone younger, and he never treated her like someone older. They met somewhere in the middle, in that tender space where two people simply understand. One day, she asked him what he wanted to do with his life. The question sounded ordinary, but the tone wasn't casual. It was thoughtful, searching. "I'm still figuring it out," he said. "Sometimes I think I know, and then I change my mind." She nodded slowly. "That's good. Changing your mind means you're paying attention." He smiled at that. "You always make uncertainty sound like a strength." "Because it is," she replied, looking up from the flowers she was trimming. "The world teaches us to rush, to choose fast, love fast, live fast. But the best things, they don't come from rushing." He watched her as she spoke, realizing that her calmness wasn't a lack of passion. It was something earned, built slowly from all the things she'd seen, all the storms she'd survived. He found himself wanting to know what those storms were, but she never offered details, and he never pushed. Some silences, he'd learned, were sacred. That evening, they shared tea again, sitting side by side as the sky turned orange and pink. She handed him another book, a slim volume of poetry this time, its cover soft from years of handling. "Read the one marked with the ribbon," she said. "It's about moments that don't ask for promises." Later that night, he did. The poem spoke of two souls who met not to change each other, but to remind one another of who they already were. It felt like she'd written it for him, or maybe for herself. The next morning, he found a small note tucked between the pages. Some connections are meant to be quiet. Don't mistake quiet for small. He kept that note, not because it was romantic, but because it was true. Their story wasn't about pursuit or confession. It was about presence, about how one person's stillness could calm another's restlessness, about how affection didn't always need to be spoken aloud to be felt completely. By now, He knew he'd remember her, not for what she said or did, but for the way she made the world slow down just long enough for him to breathe differently. The season began to turn, the air sharper in the evenings, the lights softer, more golden. With the change came a quiet awareness that things between them couldn't stay suspended forever. It wasn't tension exactly, but the knowledge that whatever this was, it lived on borrowed time. He visited less often now, though not because he wanted to. It was a silent agreement they both seemed to understand. Too much closeness might draw attention. Too much distance might break what they had built. So they found balance in the small, accidental meetings that never felt accidental at all. One Sunday morning, he saw her at the local cafe. She was sitting by the window, reading, sunlight spilling across her table. He hesitated before walking in. Something about the sight of her there, alone and content, made his chest tighten in a way he couldn't name. When she noticed him, her surprise softened into that familiar smile. "You're up early," she said as he joined her. "Couldn't sleep," he replied, glancing at the open book in front of her. "You reread the same stories?" "Some stories change when you come back to them," she said, closing it gently. "You notice different things depending on who you've become." They talked for nearly an hour, their conversation flowing easily, as always. But beneath every word lay the quiet pulse of awareness. The space between them wasn't just physical anymore. It was emotional, careful, alive with everything unspoken. As they walked out together, a light breeze lifted her hair. He reached instinctively to tuck a strand behind her ear, then froze, unsure. For a heartbeat, time held still. She didn't move away, just looked at him, eyes calm but searching. "Careful," she murmured softly, not as a warning, but as an acknowledgement. He nodded, stepping back. "I know." That single exchange said more than any confession could have. There were feelings neither could ignore, yet both refused to cross the invisible line drawn by circumstance and respect. What made their connection meaningful wasn't what they wanted. It was what they chose not to do. Days passed. They saw each other in passing, a wave across the street, a polite hello outside the grocery store. Each time, their eyes met for a little too long, carrying that quiet ache of people who shared something rare but untouchable. One evening, she sent him a message, a short one. "Thank you for reminding me that kindness can still surprise me." He stared at the words, realizing they carried both gratitude and goodbye. Not finality, but the gentle kind that asks you to remember without regret. That night, he walked past her house. The lights inside were dim, the curtain slightly open. She was there, sitting by the window with a book in her lap, her expression unreadable in the soft glow. He didn't knock. He didn't need to. Some stories don't end because they never really begin. They simply stay, quiet and complete in their incompleteness. And that was their truth. What they shared wasn't defined by what happened, but by everything they chose to leave unsaid. Autumn arrived quietly, wrapping the world in amber light and the faint rustle of falling leaves. It had been weeks since they'd last spoken. Life, in its steady and indifferent way, had moved forward. New work, new faces, the endless rhythm of days. Yet, she remained there in his thoughts, not as a constant ache, but as a calm presence. Like a song you no longer play, but still remember every note of. He saw her again by chance one afternoon. The sun was low, painting everything in soft gold. She was standing by her garden, trimming the last of the summer flowers. For a moment, he simply watched. How peaceful she looked, how her movements carried that same quiet grace he had come to know. It wasn't longing that filled him, but gratitude. The kind that comes when you realize some people are meant to change you, not stay with you. When she noticed him, her surprise gave way to a small, gentle smile. "It's been a while," she said. "It has," he replied. "I wasn't sure if I should stop by." "You always could," she said simply, setting her gloves aside. They talked like they used to, light conversation threaded with pauses that said more than words. She asked about his work, his plans, his friends. He asked about her garden, her books, her quiet life. Nothing dramatic, nothing heavy. Just two people acknowledging that time had passed and that it was okay. After a while, she handed him a small envelope. "I found this in one of the books you borrowed," she said. "It's yours." Inside was the note he had once written to himself on a scrap of paper, tucked between the pages of a borrowed book months ago. "Don't rush the story." He laughed softly. "You kept it." "I keep good reminders," she said. "They make endings easier to accept." For a moment, silence stretched between them, comfortable, familiar. The wind stirred the leaves at their feet, and she looked at him with that same steady kindness that had once unsettled him and now only soothed. "I used to think connection meant holding on," he said quietly. "But maybe it's just about learning what to let go of." She nodded, her gaze soft but unwavering. "Letting go doesn't mean forgetting. It means you've learned what you needed to." He wanted to thank her, but the words felt too small. So instead he smiled, a quiet, grateful smile, and she seemed to understand. As he turned to leave, she called after him, "You'll know when to start your next story." He looked back, sunlight behind her turning everything golden. "Already have," he said. That was their goodbye. No dramatic farewell, no promises of reunion. Just a shared understanding that some people come into your life not to stay, but to remind you what genuine connection feels like. And long after he walked away, he carried her calm with him. The voice that once told him not to rush the story, now echoing softly in every new chapter he dared to begin.